Thank you, everybody. When Jackie asked us, I was happy to say yes, and so was Bob. We've been around a long time, but then as the week passed and we've been very busy, I'm like, oh my. Bob is the brains behind this. He did the PowerPoint. We have not discussed what we're talking about, but it's on budget, but Baker Tilly is also doing some budget education, so we may have some overlap. When we first talked to Jackie, I said, well, Bob and I can come in on walkers because we've been around for a while. I hope we can do some questions and answers because I feel better prepared to do that. And without further ado, I'll turn over to Bob.
Well, thank you. And first, I wonder if people in the back are going to be able to see some of the print. I'm afraid is going to be kind of small. So if you would want to move forward, I think that would maybe be a good idea. How does this thing? How's this? Jackie, how's this go forward? I guess there's not enough keys here for, I'm hitting things. Jackie, how does this go forward? How about that? Okay, I'm with you now. Okay. Okay, gotcha. We didn't know exactly where we were supposed to start. This being budget 2, not really sure. I have not taken budget 1, so I'm not sure where that stops. So we're either going to have some gaps or we're going to be overlapping, and hopefully overlapping is a little bit better than having some gaps. But I wanted to go through a few things, some of the end point that you need to, once you're done with budgets, we need to have assessed valuations. And the process for auditors to certify values, there's a number of different components of that. And one thing I would say as far as certifying values, I'm not sure we really certify anything in that we have to get this done like the 1st of August. Deductions are filed through the end of the year. So you can't really certify. It's more of an estimate of assessed valuations, but the tax rates are figured by the amount of money that you need to receive, what the levy is, divided by the amount of assessed valuation. So that is a very important component of having an accurate assessed valuation. Some of the process, you'll receive the gross assessments from the assessor, and we received ours, 6 weeks ago at least, and so you need to get those pulled into your tax system. And then we want to, before we do certification, we need to make sure you are posting all deductions. You don't want to have a number of homesteads sitting there that you haven't posted, because the value of a homestead is so much that it really can pull down your assessed valuation, or I guess it would increase your assessed valuation. And if you are certifying an assessed valuation that's higher than what it's going to end up with, the tax rate is going to be a little bit lower. Which would be a problem in that there'd be some shortfalls for the people who are receiving the tax information. We also receive state-assessed utilities and railroads. The Department of Local Government Finance is the one that assesses those. And I believe the railroads are actively used railroads, so they will assess the lines and all the things associated with that, and you receive those from the state. And again, those are downloaded into the tax system, and those are pretty substantial values, so you want to make sure you have those in certainly before certification is completed. Neutralizing TIF real estate base values. I'm not sure if Jason's going to talk about this. I didn't look at his presentation, but TIF, captured assessment, is the difference between what the assessed value was when the TIF was set up and what the current assessment is. And now when we have trending each year, and so the values are going up, and if you did not neutralize the base assessment, any of that trending would be extra funds that would be going to the TIF district. So this would just ensure that there is not an impact based on trending. You know, they should be getting the new construction and things like that, but they should not be receiving a windfall because of trending is increasing values. And one thing you need to make sure is work with the financial consultants. For us, it's with the city. I send all of the TIF neutralizations to Umball or Baker Tilly now and have them go over them and make sure they're approving them, and then they let me know that, okay, things look okay, and then you send those on to the state, and then the state approves those. And then once they do that, you need to go through your system, and we are an MVP county, and there's just a process that from the neutralization form, you come up with a percentage. Like 1 would mean your base is going to stay exactly the same. 1.01 would mean that you would be increasing the base by 1%, and so that would basically be what the trending value would be, so that that's not going to be excess captured. Sure.
We're just going to double team this a little bit. One thing that I ran into, and some of you may too, your towns hire the consultants, and sometimes they're very busy at that time, the consultants. So it doesn't hurt to notify your towns to let them know, your goal is August 1. It's very important to the DLGF that they need to make sure their consultant who they're paying are aware that you need your numbers, and it doesn't hurt to push them because low man is last. So it's important to let your units know if they have TIFs to do that.
And I have, with Jason is very responsive, it seems like, but we have one for West Lafayette that's not quite so responsive. And with them, I have just told them it's getting sent into the state on this date, unless you come and tell me of any differences that you think. But that is a very important, and that is a time-consuming effort, because with the neutralization, you need to know your new construction within the TIF district and things that, in a larger county at least, I don't know where the new construction is. For us, we have 43 TIF districts, and so I don't know where the construction is. And so we work with our assessor, then they give us where the new construction is, and so we can go through those and determine if that is something that we should be putting in the form. We will be receiving the personal property assessments from the assessor as well. Personal property, as you know, is filed through May 15th, and that's a self-assessment. So once those are received by the assessor, they need to go over those those forms, the business personal property, to ensure that those are accurate. But they will be giving those to us somewhere in June. And then we also, when you've got everything put together, one thing that is now allowable is deducting some assessed value, withholding assessed value, and that would be based on once we're certifying these values, we have to kind of anticipate, are there going to be appeals? Some of those may be filed by that time if you can get the Form 11s out soon enough, some of them not. But a bigger thing for us at least is estimating what homesteads are we going to have filed between the certification date and the end of the year. So I do not use a uniform withholding percentage. I believe you can go up to 2%, but depending on the makeup of the taxing district, what that might be. Now this is one of those forms I'm not sure you're going to be able to see very well, and I just took a picture of my first few tax sets here, and this kind of has in the certification, and this is from MVP. This is what is going into Gateway, the portal to show for everybody in the world to see, because they're all so terribly interested in everybody's county's values and everything. It'd be nice to know on Gateway if there was a little counter, how many people actually ever look at this, but my guess would be almost zero. But this is the way we do it now instead of sending in the old Excel forms to the DLGF. But if you can kind of see across the board here, we have our real property, 1%, 2%, and 3%. 1% is the homestead property. 2% is basically other residential, and I believe ag is in there. And then 3 is mainly for us industrial, are the 3, and that is the tax cap. So 1% of your gross assessed valuation is the most you can be billing somebody for the 1% bucket, the 2%. 2% of the gross assessed valuation, and 3% for like the industrial. In Tippecanoe County, we have never had a tax cap in the 3% bucket. Our tax rates aren't high enough, but we certainly do have some 1 and some 2%. But this is what the certification is. You got those 3 values there, and then you got your total, and then you got your personal property and the state personal property, which is the railroad and utilities. And then you have the TIF, and we're pulling this TIF out because that is not going to be part of the assessed valuation that you're going to use to calculate the tax rate, because that is all going to be given to them. They are not going to be paying anything. If it's captured assessment, nothing is going to go to the schools, nothing is going to go to the libraries. It all is going to go to the Redevelopment Commission. Then we get into the AV withholding, and that is where that's we put a % into MVP, and you probably can't really tell this, but my unit 004, I've got $36 million that I'm withholding. And if we did calculate that, that's going to be a lot higher than that last unit listed there, this Jackson in 006 unit. And that's because Jackson is extremely rural. And so with rural, we don't have that many appeals. We don't have that many new homesteads are going to be filed, so you can be a lot less aggressive on knowing how much you do need to have in withholding from those. The next slide here, this is, part of this comes from the state and part of it is my little handiwork. Most of it on the left-hand page except for that last column. This is what the state gives us, and this is where the growth quotient is calculated. And the growth quotient is the 6-year non-farm income average growth rate statewide. So whether you're in Lake County or Madison County or Tippecanoe County or Hendricks County, you're going to have the same growth quotient. And the middle little columns there, I've always kind of wondered about that annual Indiana non-farm personal income. When you look at 2017, the personal income is not 293 million. I don't know if that is billion, but I don't think that that is. But anyway, this is what we get from them. And so then you can see the calculation, and you've got the calculation, the 1.047 means that the income went up 4.7% from 2011 to 2012. And we have those 6 there. And so you add those together, divide them by 6, and that comes to 3.4%. So that means our levy is going to increase by 3.4%. So it doesn't really matter what our assessed valuation is. The amount of money that we are going to bill is going to go up by 3.4%. If our assessed value goes up by more than 3.4%, that just means that the tax rate is probably going to drop a little bit. You know, when you're looking at what is going to be neutral for the taxpayer on average, you're going to look at that little or that 3.4%, the growth quotient. If your assessed valuation goes up by 10%, then on average, people are going to be paying less. If your assessed valuation goes up by 1% and the amount of money you're going to generate goes up by 3.4, obviously the tax rate's going to go up. One thing that we might want to be a little bit concerned about for 2020, we haven't received that number yet, but you see on the 6th year, the one that's going to drop off is 4.7%, which is the largest of those 6 numbers. So unless the next number comes in at 1.047, chances are that the growth quotient is going to decrease. And then you look the year after that, it was basically flat, so then you think that maybe it would go up. And I did on the last columns there just list some historical growth quotients. And for some of us that have been around forever, it used to be 5% minimum. And Nancy's going to say something.
I was trying to think back 20 years when I became auditor from being a township trustee, what scared me, how overwhelmed I felt. And it's overwhelming for those of you who are new. But I just wanted to tell you and make it clear that the state will tell you the DLGF, the growth quotient. They give you all this other information that you can look and you can check and you can do the math and really let it drill into your brain. But most resources are available on the DLGF website to explain everything. So I can't say it's nothing to be afraid of, but just look for help on the DLGF website.
And a lot of the stuff that they will put on the DLGF website, there's a little section you can go on county specific. I'm not sure if they put this on everybody's county one, but I think that may be listed down below. But you want to occasionally look at the county specific, click on your county and see what's on there, because every once in a while I see some things on there that they're not sending them, they're not telling me about them, but they just do kind of post them on there. So it is something that you might want to kind of keep track of a little bit. The next slide, if you happen to be able to see this, and hopefully in your little packet you can see this as well. I got a couple sections. The top section, I'm not going to go into that too much because it's going to be a little bit later on the actual form that we put into Gateway. But when we are doing budgets, it's an 18-month budget. So we start on July 1. If we're doing like the 2020 budget, we're starting and looking at from July 1 of 2019 through December 31st of 2020. And so you are, and what I'm doing these, and these are some numbers that I had for my budget process. You have the budget requests, and then the actual expenditures, or the anticipated expenditures for the second half of this year, any additional appropriations that you expect for the second half of this year gives you my total funds. And then with the revenues, your cash on July 1st of this year is counted as a revenue, so we're putting that in there with the property taxes collected this year yet. And then the miscellaneous revenue, which miscellaneous revenue is all revenue except for property taxes for the second half of this year and for revenue for next year, the miscellaneous revenue. And that here comes to $56 million of revenue, including my cash. But I'm saying over those 18 months, I'm going to be spending $76 million. Now, one revenue that we did not include in there is property tax for 2020. And I'm also saying the operating balance, for me, I'm saying $8 million is what we have generally used. And operating balance is saying if we want to do the budget so that everything is said and done at the end of 2020, we will have $8 million of cash. Get down to the maximum levy calculation. This kind of tells us, because I'm saying I need $28 million of property tax in 2020 for the 18-month revenue to equal the 18-month expenditures. But the state's not going to give us whatever we want. So there is a normal maximum levy, and then that was increased by my 3.4%. That's where that comes in. Then we get to add in mental health, developmental disabilities, and cum cap to get my total maximum levy, a working maximum levy. So we're adding those things in to the normal levy. I'm not sure if I really understood why we add cum cap in, because the next thing is we're subtracting it right out. But so anyway, we're at 31 million. Then we're going to be taking out the cum cap, the reassessment, the cum bridge, because all of these funds are all within this maximum levy. And then I've got up there what I'm saying above that we needed in property tax for my 28 million. I'm throwing that back in there. And so now I'm at 33 million, but I can't have 33 million. I can only have 31. So this is saying we need to do something. We need to cut $2.2 million. We can do that. We can't cut reassessment. We can't cut cum cap. We can't cut cum bridge. Those are all set rates. So there's only one little guy left that you can cut from, and that would be the general fund. Now, what we could do is absolutely nothing, and the state would approve this, but what they would do is take my 8 million and they would lower that by 2.2 million, saying, okay, maybe you're only going to have 5.75 million in operating balance. But this is something that we want to work through. The next slide is just Gateway is the portal, and I'm sure that everybody, the auditors, maybe not the treasurers as much, haven't used this much, but this is where we are inputting the stuff online, and this is the budget form section. It's all green, indicating that I've done it all. Of course, this is last year. The next page is when we do budgets, we need to let the public know what we're doing and what we are proposing. This used to be put in the newspaper. Now we can just put it on Gateway. And with this, we have when our public hearing is going to be, when we're going to start our budget hearings, and then our final adoption date, when we're going to have final approval of that. And then we have some of the other, the maximum levies listed in here in the top section. And then the tax cap credits, that is provided by the DLGF, where I've got the $2 million kind of in the middle of the page there. That is money that the state is saying we probably will not get because of tax caps. And then down below is where we enter the budget, and then the maximum funds that be collected, and then the current maximum levy. One thing that I do, and I do get error messages because Gateway is saying, are you sure you want to do this? When I put in the budget estimate, I will round up. Because at budget hearing, sometimes maybe not the general fund as much, but when you get into like EDIT or cum cap, at least for us, we will sometimes move some expenditures from the general fund over to those funds, and the state will not approve a budget that's higher than what you advertised here. So that number is important. So I always, for all of them, I round them up a little bit.
I just wanted to touch a little bit on tax caps to make sure you understand. They're called property tax cap credits. Normally credits are a good thing, or they're credits to the taxpayer, and that money will not come in, so your units will be shorted money. Your units include towns, townships, schools, libraries, and yourself. So in Bob's example of general fund, his maximum levy funds is going to be short $2 million. So you have to always keep that in mind. But it's good for the taxpayer, bad for the units.
And when, because of the tax caps, when we budget in my regular budget revenue estimate for the council, I always take that in consideration right then. So what we think our levy is going to be for like the general fund, I use lower percentage than that, usually 99 or 98% to kind of take care of that. So you don't want to overestimate revenues when you're doing your budget. Now we're going to get into Form 4B really quickly here. And this is some of the information that I had on my other little list before. And I'm not going to go over all of that, but we've got some of the same information there is what we had before. And you're going to do one of these for every fund that needs the state approval. We don't do all of our funds, but the ones that, there's a drop down where you can see the drop down in the middle towards the top of the page there. And so our advertised amount is what we started with, and then the adopted amount is what we have at that point in time. This is what the council has approved. So here, they've cut $1.75 million there at that point. And if anybody has any questions along the way, just holler out or, okay, yeah.
So you just said you don't do all of your funds, you don't do your home rule funds and such when you enter your 4B?
We do not. That
But DLGF tells us we should, right?
they would recommend we should, is the way I understood it from them. And so recommending it to me isn't the same as telling me that I must. I pretty much, yeah, the ones that are listed in there.
Good to know.
Okay. Okay. My next, and this is a continuation of the same slide, but I knew if I did it all in one, there's no way you'd be able to see it. And I do have at the bottom there where some of these numbers come from, but you've got your actual cash balance. And one thing that, well, maybe that was on the last slide, but the actual expenditures or the estimated expenditure, necessary expenditure for the second half of like this year, what you have to put in there is your budget minus what was spent the first half of the year. And so, like when I've used my $8 million operating balance, I don't really care. I mean, I had 11 million when the year started. I'm probably going to still end up with 11, but they're making the assumption that you're going to spend every penny of the budget that you have for this year. And there's no way. I mean, ours runs about 97% of our budget is spent. But when you go through their little form, they are making the assumption that you're spending 100% of everything. And the same with the revenue, and I'm more conservative in estimating revenues. So generally, we collect on revenues, and we're obviously, you can't spend any more than what your budget is. But anyway, that's where that comes. So. Oh, did I go too far? Whoops, now I'm going the wrong direction. How did I go backwards here? If the council, okay, Jackie's going to bring in microphone.
Test. Julie, can you repeat, because we're videoing?
Okay. When you calculate your revenues, and you indicated that you calculate your revenues much, or a little less, however.
Yeah.
According to your budget,
Oops, I'm going really backwards.
do you think that the adopting body, not your council by any means, DLGF, takes into account that?
No, I think they take whatever we say, and I've never had them, in the years I've done budget, they've never adjusted a revenue up or down. The only ones that they have been like excise and maybe like financial institutions tax, the things that they're involved in, but they've never raised one penny any of my revenues.
Right, I would understand that they wouldn't raise it, but I was wondering if they would take that into account when they're setting your rates and adjusting those rates. I'm looking for an opinion.
Yeah.
If there's not enough revenue to handle your budget, yes, they'll make cuts.
That's what, okay.
So.
All right, how do I get backwards?
And if you're working on that through the year, you can kind of see, like I also budget on the low side of revenues, because just in case. And I don't put any of the little ones on there usually. So it's, like Bob said, it's better to estimate low so you get enough tax money in.
Can I add to that just a little bit? Can I join in on your fund? The big thing about estimating low is if you overestimate your revenue and it doesn't come in, that budget is not fundable the next year. And it's my understanding in all the years I've been doing it that the home rule revenues, your home revenues, they take exactly what you give them. They will not up it or decrease it from what you give them until your 1782 notice comes out. And when your 1782 notice comes out, if you can, and they lowered because there was not enough revenue, you can then at that point in time use actual revenues that have come in for that last 6 months and adjust. But if you use one actual revenue, then you have to use all actual revenues. So you want to be careful. But the big thing is overestimating will underfund your budget, and you'll have shortfalls, and they're very, very difficult to make up.
And I know it's easier said than done, but the best thing is to have a good, solid cash balance to start with. But once you don't, it is difficult. And yeah.
Bob. Hey, Bob. For the new auditors, one thing to point out is that get to know your DLGF field rep very, very well, and work with them, and not only new auditors, all auditors, but there is that bundle of revenues such as the state distributions, the excise tax, the FIT, CVET, that DLGF will calculate an estimate of, and they will use that estimate through their review and approval process. So, your DLGF field rep will be giving you those prior to when you have your workshop with the DLGF this summer with the field reps. And please take a look at those, make sure they look reasonable, compare them to historical distributions. Occasionally those are miscalculated, and the sooner you can discuss that with your field rep and plead your case and prove your point, that can be changed. I've had that happen in my county, and we've negotiated that well, you're estimating excise at X amount, and excise has never been that high, or something like that, and they will listen to you, and so you can get it, you can head it off before you get to the 1782 notice stage, but definitely in the 1782 notice stage, if that estimate that you thought you had come to an agreement on is still not changed, you need to definitely kick back on that with the LGF. But get to know your field rep and work really close with your field rep.
Yeah, we've had issues with our excise. For our general fund, we've had over $2 million the last 3 years from excise, and our estimates keep coming in at around 1.7 million. And okay, I brought that up, and when we do it, we're using the 2 million. They're cutting back our operating balance, but when we get to 1782, that's when you're seeing it on there, and at that point, okay, they've cut back the operating balance. I don't really care because I'm pretty confident in our number for excise. It just historically, that's been.
Reduced, then that you're going to be okay. It's when your budget gets reduced that it's very critical.
I just wanted to add on to Dan's point. It's okay to push back. Be polite and respectful to your DLGF reps or Board of Accounts or state auditors. But if you see something that doesn't look right, no one else is going to bring it to their attention. So it's up to you to bring it to their attention, and you might be wrong, you may be right, and make your case, and they'll make a decision on it. But it's okay to question things and push back. I think last year we got income tax reports 5 times. So things happen up there and at home, and if things aren't right, be sure and ask. There's nothing wrong with that at all.
And from what Dan said, talking about your field reps, that I just got an email yesterday about setting up a time, and ours was like early August, where the field rep meets with all of the entities, the schools, the cities, no matter if you've been there for 25 years or 25 days, they meet with everybody, and usually they will give extra time to the auditor to start with, and certainly if you're a new auditor, you want to make sure that you have enough time and make sure that they are checking over your information to make sure that you're not making any glaring mistakes, because if there is a glaring mistake on budget, you will be in the newspaper and not in a good sort of way. So anyway, thank Dan for that. Now, with Dan Baston sitting out there, for those of you that don't know Dan, he's the auditor from Morgan County. He was the settlement director for the auditor estate for, I think, since I was in diapers, but for a long time. And anyway, for Nancy and I to sit up here and we got Dan Baston there, it is pretty much akin to we're leading a Bible study and the Pope is in the audience. I mean, so he's just a little too intimidating, but he's so nice but anyway, okay. Moving on here. This next page is the budget form 4, which this is the form that is really an ordinance or resolution. It says, and when you're all done with budget hearings, this needs to be signed by your county council. And this is the final budget that they're going to approve. And so we don't have any of these estimates. There's no more rounding up anymore. Now we have actual numbers. Yes, that is all the ones that, I've seen this where other counties have a lot of them. We don't. We're a simple people in Lafayette, but so. Once you don't have the form, the funds in there, so. And this does take 2 readings, at least in Tippecanoe County, any ordinance we have is 2 readings. So the first reading we have is when budget hearings start, that has the big numbers in it. And then when we get to the final reading, the final approval, then that's when we have these. And so that's when these are signed off. Okay. Okay. Now we're going to move into some of our past lives, and we've got some real treasures here. So, but one thing that we were asked to talk about are the printing options for tax bills. And maybe I'll ask Nancy. Nancy outsources tax bills, or Nancy's county outsources tax bill, and our county does it in-house. So I don't know if you want to use my slides or you just talk, but.
We used to print in-house also until the TS1 came on, and to get multiple matching up, we just didn't think we had the staff to handle it. I was treasurer at that time, I believe. So, like Bob said, they do theirs in-house, and some reasons to do that, to outsource, are less stress. You call your printer and you make arrangements. They send you samples. They make sure everything's in the boxes you want, and it's less stressful than printing tax bills and your printer breaks, or you run out of toner, you forgot to order it. Your outsourcing will tell you these are going to be dropped in the mail this day, and pretty much it does alleviate some stress, but there's a cost associated with it. In-house printing, it reduces cost. The treasurer would be in charge of printing and stuffing and folding and get them in the envelopes and ready to go to the post office. Bob's in a big county, so that's probably 70,000, 80,000 tax bills. We're similar sized counties. To do that, when you're doing it in-house, you want to make sure your static information is all done. You've got your bills ready to go, your static information on the back with your change of address form or whatever your county chooses, your TS1 information on the back, get it updated with your own website, your own assessor, auditor, treasurer's websites or phone numbers, emails, and just be sure you're ready. Make sure your printers work. You may need multiple printers. Your stuffing, folding, sealing machine works. You need to control how much it weighs, because we always worked very hard not to go over 1 ounce, because you don't want to go to the 2nd ounce, which costs a lot more. If you can sort them through outsourcing, they can really fine-tune the sorting to get your very best rate. In-house, you can probably do that too, but it wouldn't be as easy. So if you can sort the way the post office wants you to sort, you can achieve a better rate. And they have to go first class. You can't take the cheapest rate there is. The sorter, folder, stuffer can be used by other departments. You can use it in the auditor's office for your checks every other week. So there's definitely some benefits. I think Bob feels like in his county, I think it was a good deal. Have you ever outsourced? Yes, we did. Okay. They had outsourced 1 year, and then they decided to go back. We haven't got there. Right now, our county is growing so fast. We've got about 180,000 people. I think there's no possible way we could get that task done. I think some counties bring in volunteers, other offices volunteer to help. So, well, it works you got to look at your own county and what resources you have and what money you have, because it's definitely an increased cost. When I was treasurer a few years ago, and I don't know if they've done it since, I did a survey, but I just had 2014 information to see how much everybody spent for doing both ways. But we didn't feel like it was accurate enough 5 years later to share with you. Oh, Bob's inserter is paid for, and then there's a 1 year buyout, $1 buyout at the end of the lease. Oh, also in Bob's notes, they use the annual jury questionnaires, with their printer sorter. So there's all kind of people that can use them. I think our election we helped with trying to get people to know where the vote centers were. We add the vote center flyers into our bills. So if you're under 1 ounce and any other department, like election, because it runs almost the same time in the spring, we always offer to allow them to have something in it. One thing we do, or I did, and I think Bob does too, is when we're ready to send out the bills, I usually called each of our post office to say, hey, they're going to drop, because that's not their favorite time. And we also notify our banks, because we use 6 banks in Hendricks County, plus we have a lockbox. I don't know if any of you use lockbox, but that's another thing I don't think we could get by without. I do not believe Tippecanoe does not use lockbox either. They are so good there. I think they had a problem one year, and they had to manually post, and it worked out well, so they went back to doing that. Change. Yes. And we net it against our interest. One thing that we ran into problems with on our bills, we with Lao, we have an A, B, and C bill. A lot of people just are not aware which part to tear off. So they'll send in the C bill, which does not have the coding on it. So then that has to be manually processed at the bank, which costs a lot more. So we're trying to find room to get that coding on the bottom. So when people send in the wrong copy, happens very often. We have the barcodes that, and probably most of you do, the reader reads them at the counter, so it automatically brings up the parcel that you're posting to. We have different payment methods in the different systems that you make it really convenient. Used to, in Hendricks, we had a posting room. Nothing was posted in real time. So after the end of the day, it would go to the posting room, and for weeks they would post later on. We do everything in real time now. Our used to mail was stacked up table after table. That's all gone with technology. Technology has definitely been our friend. We'll talk about the bill. Bob's example of his bill. The property taxes due. I'm trying to read his notes. The May bill is unpaid after the fall collection. This is a second installment bill, so the May bill has been paid. I better let him talk about his own notes.
On this, and I kind of chopped off the A bill because it looks very similar to the B. But if you just could imagine that is an A bill, the property tax due is the current amount, and there would be delinquent tax shown if this bill, even if it were paid but paid late, it shows a delinquent tax amount. If this were a spring bill, if last fall wasn't paid, it would show a delinquent tax amount, and if it was paid, the next day, it would then show under the less payments. So it kind of nets itself out. And sometimes there's some taxpayers who, don't like to see that on there. That okay, yeah, they know they paid late, but they're not delinquent. You get to your pay on before the May 10, it's going to be your amount there. But that is something that is concerning to some taxpayers, but that's just the way, at least this is an MVP bill, and that's how that works. Of course, we've got the scan bar up there, and the year we had an issue with the lockbox was also the year we had, last year, I think we had outside printing done in the Micker line, the one down below. They had a space in there they weren't supposed to have, and so they couldn't read them at the lockbox. We were at Chase at that point. They couldn't read them. And so not only did we have to post them by hand there for a few days, I had to drive to Indianapolis to go and get them and bring them back home because they were all delivered to Indianapolis. But we had an issue that way. And then, okay, that wasn't so bad. And now, with having less personal property bills, that does cut back on the bill some when we're looking at that. The next page, if you can see this, hopefully you can see it in your little packet there. This is a bill that maybe disregard who the owner is. Happens to be the Purdue football coach's house, because he's got some of the components to here that wanted to talk about a little bit. But on this one here, he's got a gross assessment on that line 1A of $612,000. The deductions, and I do list those over to the right there. Those are his deductions that add up to $246,000. So to get down to his net assessment of $365,000, which is on line 3, then we have the district tax rate, the 2.903, and that's per $100 of assessed valuation, net assessed valuation. And then that calculates out to $10,623 that you see on line number 4. And then with line 4A, that is the amount of, for us, it'd be the homestead credit, the percentage that's taken off, that for us comes off of from LIT funding. And then we also, and so we get to that point. And so if you take the calculated tax of $10,623 and deduct the LIT of $1,187, that would be the calculated net, which would be 4 minus 4A of $9,400. But you can see down below that we have tax caps, and 1% of his gross assessed valuation, $612,000. So that would be $6,126 is the tax cap. If I go to the next little screen here, and again, there are the tax caps, the type of properties that in the different buckets of 1, 2, and 3%. And so then we again have the $10,623, but now you would think with the tax caps, he would be paying $6,126, but yet the bill is saying almost $7,500. And that is because this is for a West Lafayette property, there is a voter-approved referendum. And once that has gone through the referendum process, so it was on the ballot, and the citizens voted to increase taxes, that is above the tax cap. And for us, on this particular property, down below the next to last line, the voter-approved referendum, that's $1,353.98. So we add that to the normal tax cap of $6,126. So now that's where we back up to about the $7,500. So the one tax cap, I mean, like Nancy mentioned, that is not reimbursable to all. That is just lost. But then the other is voter-approved referendum, and so that is money that goes directly to the school corporation. Okay. And I think this one is just about the same thing. I'm going to skip right over that one. And the next thing we were maybe asked, or maybe we came up with this on our own, does a mortgage deduction lower property taxes? Seems like a pretty simple question, and the answer is not always. It does lower your assessment, but it doesn't always lower your taxes. And I put this together of just, these come in pairs, these columns come in pairs. And these are from, well, fictitious assessments and true tax rates. But if you go through the gross assessment of $145,000, then you have a $45,000 standard. The supplemental homestead, which is like, that is the remainder after the standard is taken away, and 35% of that. So 145 minus 45 is 100,000, and then the supplemental homestead is 35% of that, so there's another 35,000 off. The mortgage deduction takes $3,000 off, and so that leaves my net assessed valuation at $6,200. And so this is in the 1% tax cap bucket, so $1,450, which is 1% of the $145,000. Then when I take my tax rate calculation and I come up with my net taxes that would be billed of $1,438.34, and you notice that is lower than the tax cap maximum of $1,450. Now I take that same property, I'm just going to take off the mortgage deduction, and I go through that same calculations. Now the calculated tax comes to $1,507, which is above the $1,450 maximum. So I'm going to be billing $1,450. So by taking that mortgage deduction off, that saved these people $11.66 for the entire year. Now, $147,300 is the little magic number in this particular taxing unit. I do the same thing with the mortgage deduction. It comes down to my calculated tax at $1,473.01. My 1% bucket cap is $1,473. So in actuality, these people would have 1 cent of tax cap credit. Now in this one, now I'm going to take off the mortgage deduction. So everything is going to kind of flow the same. My calculated tax now is $1,542, but I can only bill them $1,473 since this is in the 1% bucket. So now you see those two properties, they saved absolutely nothing by either paying off a mortgage or taking out a mortgage if you didn't have a mortgage deduction on there before. And this is one of the things, and Dan Baston has done such a wonderful job as the Auditor's Office guru for legislation, and this is one thing that the Auditors Association has tried to push the last few years, that we need to look at the mortgage deduction. It is very time-consuming, and when you now look at tax caps, probably for us in our county, we probably have 25% of the people who save nothing by having a mortgage deduction. So our proposal was maybe to increase the standard deduction a little bit to compensate for that. And another, if everybody has a mortgage deduction, really nobody does, because it's all taken in consideration. Okay, the next one is just the same sort of thing, but I'm now using, this happens to be the tax unit that I live in, which is not in the city. And now you see, I'm not going to go through the calculation, but both of them, the mortgage deduction saves them about $37.88 because I'm not to tax cap, not really even that close to it. So this is what the true mortgage deduction, if you don't have tax cap, you are going to save money by having a mortgage deduction. But if you're in, basically for us at least, the cities, it's going to be tax capped, and so there's not going to be any savings there. Now the next, maybe I'll let Nancy, this is a copy of the Lau bill. Pretty similar, but.
The next two examples are veterans deductions. We probably get more questions about veterans deductions than anything, especially the VA or veterans do a good job letting their people know what they should apply for. So our veteran service officers are far more than for signing death claims. So what we really get pushback on is they have the deduction, but when they're capped out, it does no good. And the same with some of the other deductions. So this is an example. The first one's a veteran in an average priced home, and her deductions, she has both, the $24,960 and the $12,480. Is that what it is? So hers, she gets the credit. The next one, which one is it? Is a higher priced home. Is that on here? This gentleman lived in our district that had an Avon referendum, and he came in and he was perfectly happy with the referendum when they were voting. Then I glanced up the other day and he was at the counter asking for an over 65. So he's in the town that had the school referendum, and he lives in a higher priced home. He has a geothermal and a veteran's deduction. My chief deputy makes up worksheets. We've probably done it for several years, maybe even before he was there. But we do worksheets for every taxing unit because we had a lot of people worried about the referendum. This was our very first year. We were worried about the referendum. So we could show them approximately what it would be. So we have these worksheets on an Excel spreadsheet for each taxing district. And you can explain to your veterans or geothermal or whoever it is, when they don't see the bottom line total annual tax amount never changes with whatever deductions. I plugged in the veterans and the geothermal, just the veterans, just the geothermal, and it just doesn't do any good when you're in the higher priced home. So these worksheets, if you don't have anything like that, they really, you can kind of satisfy their anger about how, it's not you making the mistake, you can justify it to them. Similar to the mortgage deductions. Some of these deductions, they hear about them and they expect a really great benefit, and then there's so many exclusions, and if you're tax capped, and probably 3/4 of our residential is tax capped. We're very high homestead. And then the last page is Bob from the Thomson Reuters system, the percent of collection report. Lao has a similar report, and I'm not sure what Guts, I'm sure they all have very similar reports where you can get to it. I don't know if I couldn't tell if this is full year or full year. So it tells what percentage in each taxing district. So that's kind of, people will ask you how many people pay their taxes, how many are delinquent. So this kind of helps you percentage-wise.
I think that's all we have. Unless there's any question, I think Jackie told me maybe we're going to break, if there's no other questions.